Shalom and good day, this is Tehillim29 back again for another DC review, and in this DC review I'll be covering Spirit World by Alyssa Wong and Static by Narcisse. So I'll get things organised and set up for the first one that I'll be covering. So first things first, and moving into the rating for the cover. Does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that is happening inside with the story? Sure enough it does, to which I give it a 7 out of 10. Now it's time to move into the internal art, as well as some of the things that are happening story-wise. So with this, we get a bit of a flashback to 15 years ago, to which we get to see a young Xanthi, and she ends up being hit and dies in a car. As the story progresses, of course, there's something that happens between her mother and herself at the home, and they eventually head out. I must say, I do agree with some of the criticism in regards to the story around that, what has been brought up, and I think Alyssa Wong really flushed the toilet really hard with the story, and not only that, causing a blockage for the case of this, because it would be nice to actually hear Xanthi's real name in this, and the fact that they're playing on the character's non-binary and all that nonsense, it really does take away from the story. And I do agree that she shouldn't be upset at her mother because of something that happened to her 15 years ago, and even though her mother recognizes her by the name, in technicality, the dead name crap just wouldn't apply. And I feel that what she's doing here is also going against the law that she has already set in the story. And that could lead this particular story run to go on a very deep dive. And I mean a very deep dive, and the sales will hit the floor drastically. And even though I am interested in like the story of the spirit world within the DC universe, I do feel it sort of did affect some of the art here as well too, in some places. As we start to jump towards the end, we get to catch up and find out what's happening with Cassandra Cain in the spirit world. So for the internal art, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. And I do also agree with some of the criticism that has gone out, that I think this story would have been better off if it just focused more on the character of Xanthi and her, and maybe even picked up, or maybe even left like a little bit of a spoiler towards the end, that we'll be returning back to Cassandra Cain's story in the next issue. So now it's time to move. Now it's time to move into the area of the story. So we end up moving into one of the things that came up within the story. We did have the Lazarus Planet Dark Fate comic book reference come up again in the story. Next is the area of time, to which we had 15 years ago, and now representing the present. The key location that this takes place is in Gotham City, Chinatown, and we also had the spirit world, and the character also moved forward to the graveyard. The key characters were Xanthi, Constantine, her mother, her dad, her sister, who is called Steffi, which is really interesting because one of the members as well on the Bat family is called Stephanie. We also had Bowen, Cassandra Cain, Popo, and Mr. Hong, who played their part in this. For the overall story rating in this, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. Yes, I do feel the story did drop quality in this, but hopefully issue 3 will pick it up. I don't know that it will or not, because if it doesn't, I could end up dropping this series. And, well, that wouldn't be too much of a bad thing. At least I still get to enjoy City Boy. Now it's time to move on to static Anansi. So, jumping into the area of the rating for the cover. Does this cover in any way, shape, or form connect to something that is happening inside with the story? Sure enough, it does, to which I give it a 7.5 out of 10. I'll now move to showing some of the internal art, as well as some of the things that are showing story-wise within the art, around the beginning, middle, and end. And then move into the art rating. So as the story begins, we end up meeting up with the character of Anansi, and this is actually taking place in Kiabobo National Park in Ghana. So we get to see him actually taking place in a part of, or on the continent of Africa, before he ends up moving to where we get to see Static in Dakota. So as we slowly jump towards, or as we get around to the middle of the story, we finally have Anansi and Static meet up. Of course, there's a bit of discussion between them, as well as some events to which he also gets to help out, and they get to help each other out. And I really like what the character here of Anansi does, and really want to thank Comic Boom's channel as well for pointing it out too, because it's really nice to see how his power actually works. And last but not least, towards the end, so for the internal art, I give it a 7.5 out of 10. Now it's time to move in relation to the story. Now, one thing I didn't expect this one shot to have was actually comic references to one of the, some of the comics that might actually be important to this story. So a big thanks for that. A great job from the editor there. We had the Static Season 1, which we know is done by Vida Ayala, and of course we move into the Shadows of Dakota, which is practically the second season. And we also had Icon versus Hardware referenced as well. Moving into the next thing is the area of time. It would have been a little bit nice to know when this was taking place time-wise, but did it actually take away from the rest of the story? Not so much. So, the key locations, we had the National Park in Ghana, we had Dakota City, we also had Sierra Leone and one of the islands there. The key cast of characters consisting of Anansi, Static, Virgil Hawkins, Devrak, and Nathan Flack, I think it is. And for the overall story rating, I gave this a 7.5 out of 10. I'm really surprised to say this, but I actually enjoyed this more than Spirit World. Well, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.